Thank you, Dr. Winkenwerder. Our next award is the Founding Leadership Awards. This year, as the doctor alluded to, we're celebrating a very special anniversary. It's the 30th year since this group of Vietnam veterans came together and formed this organization, and it was originally called the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Program. Now, there's a term that I like to use for men like the men that started this organization. See, they were men that served their country during a very difficult time in our nation's history. They came home and they saw a need. And from that service and seeing that need, it led them into a leadership role. The term for people like that is servant leaders. Now, it might seem strange that I would link servant and leadership in the same phrase. The words don't seem to go together. But in 1970, a man named Robert Greenleaf coined the term servant leadership, and it's one of my favorite forms of leadership. You see, Mr. Greenleaf was a very successful businessman, but he was influenced by reading a short novel called Journey to the East. It's a story of a band of men on a mythical journey. And the central figure of this journey is a man named Leo. But Leo was the servant to the party. He does the menial chores. He guides them. He takes care of them. He leads them with his spirit and energy, although he's their servant. The journey goes very well until Leo disappears one day. And the whole group fell into disarray, in fact, and finally they had to disband the journey without Leo. They couldn't get by without Leo. Now, the narrator of the story, who's part of the journey, continues to wander about for years until he finds Leo. And he is taken in by a group that Leo belongs to that had actually sponsored the trip. He knows Leo only as a servant, but when he joins the group, he finds out that Leo is, in fact, their bold leader. You see, Leo was a leader all along, but he had a servant's heart first. And out of that servant's heart, it led him to leadership. That's what I think of when I think of the men that started this organization 30 years ago. Thank goodness we had Vietnam veterans who had the heart of servant leaders in Pittsburgh 30 years ago. In 1982, a group of Vietnam veterans joined together to meet a need. Mills were closing down. Manufacturing jobs were disappearing. Many veterans were out of work and out of hope. The original concept was to provide job placement and training for Vietnam veterans who were displaced in a changing economy. At that time, none of the VLP's founders imagined the agency would still be meeting that need today. But here we are.
At that time, in the early 80s, the Vietnam veteran was really receiving a lot of negative publicity through the movies, through the media. A lot of people thought negatively of the veteran himself. And this probably affected the veteran even more than the war itself. You expect to come home to support and not the people turning their backs on you.
There needed to be some way to turn about this negative feeling about the Vietnam veterans. And I believe that was part of the reason that the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Programs were started.
A lot of veterans were having difficulties. Among ourselves, we knew that there were a lot of successful veterans, and the people in the media were not looking at these veterans at all. But we knew that the concept of the Action Housing proposal was what we were looking for, and that was a vet work. Veterans helping veterans. That's what we did in Vietnam, and that's what we could do here.
The fact that VVLP was being formed gave like-minded veterans an opportunity to work together. And it was that spirit of working together to help other Vietnam veterans at the time that moved most of us at the beginning.
There were many veterans organizations at the time that we could work through, the VFW, the American Legion, Vietnam Veterans Incorporated. But the county space we had, I believe, was at the Clerk of Courts at that time, but there was a county Veterans Affairs office, which was run by a director named Joe Pugini, who is a huge supporter of ours. We eventually moved into the County Veterans Affairs, gave us space down there, and we were able to use his resources along as well as all the other resources of the other organizations to get the word out there. It wasn't hard. There were a lot of unemployed and underemployed veterans at the time, so any program that was able to help them, they were reaching out to.
Because of that negative opinion, there was some reluctance to hire Vietnam veterans. So part of the changing of the bad image was saying, hey, give these vets a chance. They'll hire them and they'll serve your company right. So I think that's probably the greatest focus that we had.
We knew that we had some executives who were Vietnam veterans, Fred Sargent from Sargent Electric, Bob Lufty, which was Mellon Stewart at the time, now with American Bridge, Mike Hepler, the CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Western Pennsylvania. We needed to reach out to them and ask them to help us find employment for these people if they were hiring, to try to hire the vet first. And it was very successful. We found so many Vietnam veterans in the corporate world through the banks and other corporations, U.S. Steel, that was very, very valuable to us. We were a handful of veterans who had a big heart, had the right idea, but we didn't have the skills and the knowledge to create what we wanted. Therefore, we had to expand the board and bring on people with those skills. And so we started reaching out. In the very beginning, we had nothing but veterans on the board. And we realized that there were people out there who cared as much about the veterans as we do. And we started to bring the civilian people onto the board, who really brought a lot of valuable skills that we needed for the fundraising, grant writing, and those types of things. And from there, we started to secure what grants were available, and that's when we moved into the homeless veterans, the housing, and many other programs that you see today.
Well, just like any other organization that begins from ground up, you look at the people involved and you say, okay, how can we raise money? Now, we're going back 30 years, so at the beginning, we were not sophisticated. Back then, we raised money by selling T-shirts, or having oldies dances, or having raffles. I mean, those are small potato kinds of fundraising events that we held, but they were effective. And to some extent, we were not so focused on raising an awful lot of money as opposed to raising awareness. At the beginning of VVLP, all we tried to do was the mission at hand right then. We never thought of how long it would last. We never thought how it would evolve. We never thought who would be coming, following us, who would follow us. We just did the best we could. I don't think that we said, okay, where do we want to be in 5, 10, 20, 30 years? It just happened. My guess is we probably never thought it would last this long. And it's a tribute, really, to all those who followed the founders, if you will, this very beginning 30 years ago, that carried it through.
You look back to where we started, to the envision of the growth and to where it is today. What I see for the future is, you hate to get in the political climate, but there are hot spots in the world. There are wars still going on. We're still involved, and there's still going to be veterans coming home that need help.
When you're talking about helping veterans, there really is no end. It continues. The mission continues. And today we have veterans that have the same problems that we had when we returned from Vietnam. So in a sense, the mission continued.
It's been a great privilege and honor to be a part of VVLP in the beginning. I had many years where, as I worked for the federal government, I could not be actively involved in the VLP, but I still was able to watch it grow and still knew all the people involved. And I'm very proud of what they have accomplished. And I would personally like to thank everyone who had any input into VVLP and helped us to get to where we're at. They should all be extremely, extremely proud.
Well, as a fellow Vietnam veteran, having served with men like this, it's an extraordinary pleasure and honor for me to welcome them to the stage. This year's recipients of the Founders Leadership Awards. First, welcome to the stage Mr. Thomas Fitzgerald Jr., Mr. Anthony Accomando Jr., Johnny McCoy, and Steve Price. These are recipients of the awards.
the bush. For all my Christian family that knows that term, that's what VVLP then, VLP now, refers to. That we were a stopgap. We stood in place of services that weren't available for veterans coming home. We were the vanguard, if you will. But I'm reminded when I think of veterans helping veterans, the important thing to know is that we didn't do this for the veterans. We did this with the veterans. There's a certain amount of dignity and pride a veteran maintains, and all we did is supported that. So on behalf of the VVLP, all the military around the world, past and present, I am so humbled to receive this award. Certainly, God bless you and your families, and by all means, God bless America.